So good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome, welcome on this December 18th. Christmas is a week from today. Yay. And Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, begins on December 24th. They're all coming together, and it lasts until sundown on January 1st. So we are sitting in the midst of a holy season for millions and millions of people around the world, many of whom are looking for light, for hope, in a landscape that for many seems dark. And I think we were talking earlier about how sometimes if there are challenges in your life anyway, at the holiday season, they somehow just get darker. So there are millions of people around the world, we know, we don't, that are just looking for hope and light and peace in this holiday season. We have uncertainty about the future, we have regional conflicts, we have economic disruption, we have shrinking opportunity, diminishing hope. I can think of no better time to have a season devoted to the return of the light and the knowledge that miracles can happen. So, as I was researching this talk, I came across a story which I knew about, and many of you probably know about, which illustrates for me the truth that in our lives, miracles can happen and we can be agents of them. So the year was 1914, and the world was falling into a major conflict that would ultimately claim over 38 million lives, soldiers and civilians dead and injured. A huge global conflagration. Britain, in the fall of that year, a call went out for 100,000 volunteers to fight for king and country. They marched off joyfully. They thought the war was going to be short and decisive. For that initial call of 100,000 people, 500,000 signed up. Plus 250,000 boys who were underage and just lied to get in. There was such enthusiasm to get into what they thought was a conflict that would redeem their country, serve their king, settle the world order, and none of those things actually happened. By December of 1914, the war was in full force, and it was clear that the boys would not be home for Christmas. They were in the trenches, they were hunkered down, and there was no end in sight. So our story unfolds in the trenches in France, on the Western Front. So in December of 1914, I don't know if you have read anything about trench warfare in World War I. Okay, how many people thought they would come here today and hear a lecture on trench warfare? Okay, pretty much none of you, see? I love us. Okay, so the trenches were maybe 50 yards to 250 yards apart. They had 10,000 kilometers of trenches on one side and 19,000 on the other. It was a huge structure. They were dug in, and there they stayed. They would have periodic battles, they would go over the top. It was incredibly dangerous as you traverse no man's land. But life in the trenches consisted mainly of keeping your head down, hoping to stay alive, and avoiding rats, lice, cold, disease, and fear. It was a truly desperate circumstance. So in that year, the history goes, as the British Expeditionary Force hunkered down 50 yards away from the Germans hunkered down, miserable, cold, everybody far from home, everybody wishing they were home for Christmas. At 7 or 8 in the evening on Christmas Eve, the British Expeditionary Force heard singing, which was the last thing they expected to hear. They saw some lights, and this is how one veteran recalled it. It was a Christmas card Christmas Eve. There was white, beautiful moonlight, frost on the ground, almost white everywhere, and round about, I should think, 7 or 8 in the evening, we heard this singing and a lot of commotion, and we saw some lights. I don't know what they were, some lights, and later we heard them singing Silent Night, Stille Nacht in German. I shall never forget it. It's one of the highlights of my life, absolutely, to see them. I thought, what a beautiful tune, as he sat in his trench. We all woke up, the other people to come along and see what on earth was going on. They finished their carol. We applauded them. Imagine this. This is in the middle of World War I. The Germans are singing, the Brits are applauding. And so then that song finished, so the Brits thought, well, we must retaliate. And so they came back with the first Noel that we just sang. When we finished, they all started clapping, and then they struck up a carol of theirs, O Tannenbaum. Just think of this. So we went on. First the Germans singing one of their carols, and then we'd sing one of ours. Then we started singing, O come all ye faithful, and the Germans chimed in Latin, Adeste Fideles, singing along. Well, I thought this was rather an extraordinary thing, really, to think of two nations both singing the same carol in the middle of a war. An extraordinary thing in this season of miracles. So at one point, some brave men got out of the trenches. They met in the middle. They shook hands and waved. Everybody saw they hadn't been shot. So then the trenches emptied out, and everybody met in the middle. And they traded cigarettes and cognac and cigars and stories. And for that moment, they had a time of Christmas peace and sharing and even some celebration in the middle of that horrible war. They played soccer in the middle of that. Now, these moments didn't just happen in one spot. They happened all up and down the line. For just a moment, there was a time of peace in the midst of a horrible, violent conflict that was created solely by the heart of hope in those men. The humanity of those soldiers, their need to celebrate this time of peace and light and hope overcame their fear. They reached out, and back in those days, when you popped your head up above the trench, you were shot. I mean, they were not kidding. But the drive in their hearts to celebrate, it's Christmas Eve. This is a time that I know is light and hope and love, and they just did. They reached out to establish a bond of peace on that night. One writer recalled that as they met, we tried to explain to each other that we bore no malice. That's amazing. So, I think of stories like this when I ask myself, what is a miracle? Because that was one. What happened that night was not supernatural. It was not inexplicable. It was not one of those, oh wow, you know, what did God do now? It was just a moment where peace flowered in a place where every effort had been made to stamp it out. That renders that night the truest of miracles. So I thought, maybe a miracle is not a big show put on by the divine. Maybe it's not always, you know, the parting of the Red Sea, the sun standing still in the sky. Perhaps a true miracle is in moments like this, when the love that is at our true nature shines through despite all the efforts we have made and all the things we have learned to silence it. So I thought about that. I thought about foxholes and I thought about trenches. And I thought, we're not in foxholes. We are so blessed so as not to be in trenches. But then I thought, don't we always sometimes get in them? Don't you ask yourself, what sort of trenches have you dug? What sort of foxholes do you find yourself that you've dug yourself for your own protection, for your own safety, for your own insulation? We all have places that we hide, places of seeming safety that we dig in and hunker down in to keep others out. I know I do, and I'm guessing others do as well. In this season, we can ask ourselves, what will it take for us just to pop our heads up, to reach out, to sing a song, to try to connect with others in peace and in hope? So the reading this morning was from a work known as A Course in Miracles. And some of you may be familiar with that. And as I thought about miracles, I thought, what a perfect definition that course gives to a miracle, and I want to share it with you today. For those of you who are not familiar with A Course in Miracles, it has a background that speaks to us, especially at this time in our history, when so much of our world is in conflict and in despair and in need and in confusion. The course began with a decision of two psychologists at Columbia University in New York to join in a common undertaking. The introduction to the course states, it does not matter who they were, except that it shows that with God all things are possible. Because you have not seen two more unlikely people to come up with A Course in Miracles. One of the participants, actually the lady who got the information, it was basically channeled to her from her voice. Her name was Helen Schuckman. And she described the beginning of the project this way. Psychologist, educator, conservative in theory, and atheistic in belief, I was working in a prestigious and highly academic setting. And then something happened that triggered a chain of events I could never have predicted. The head of my department, a guy named William Thetford, unexpectedly announced that he was tired of the angry and aggressive feelings our attitudes reflected: competition, aggression, hostility. And he concluded, there must be another way. There must be another way. As if on cue, I agreed to help him. These two people had not gotten along. And just on cue, I agreed to help him. Apparently, this course is the other way. Helen started having what she called strange dreams and highly symbolic images. She began to hear a voice that continued over the next 6 years. It started out this way. It said, "This is a Course in Miracles. Please take notes." She was terrified. I mean, I kind of thought of the Prophet Muhammad when he first started hearing recite. What did he do? He went home and told his wife Khadijah he was nuts. And Helen Schucman did the same thing. She thought she was crazy. But with William Thetford's encouragement, she started writing down what she was hearing in shorthand. She would give it to him, and the next day he would type it up. This went on for 7 years. You would not see two more unlikely people to come up with A Course in Miracles, because it talks about peace and God and love, and it gives us practices to find that peace in our own hearts. It teaches us that peace is possible, and when we are at peace ourselves, we cannot help but spread it to others. While the language of the Course is traditionally Christian, it speaks to the principles that are the basis of all the world's faith traditions, just like we study here. It provides practices that bring us back to our true knowledge that our essence is joy and peace and love, and that we have no need of the layers of fear and anger and separation and judgment that over time we have learned. And we call that progress. What's that about? We don't have any need of it when we're young, but when we get to be our age and we're all grown up, we think we've grown up. Oh, we are so wrong. We have so much to unpack. So the Course in Miracles has a different view of a miracle, one that challenges us to participate as miracle makers, reflecting the truth of ourselves as perfect and beloved children of God, no matter who we are or what we are, perfect and beloved children of God, right here and right now. According to the Course, miracles happen every day, daily events, and if they don't, something is wrong. I just love that. Every day. And if they don't, something is not on track. So the Course teaches us that a miracle is nothing more, and having said that, this is everything, a shift in perception from fear to love, to what is unreal to what is real. It's just a correction, as they call it, in our thinking. The Course teaches miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. The real miracle is the love that inspires them. In this sense, everything that comes from love is a miracle. The truth of our essence is that we are made from love. And every time we make the choice to live from that knowledge, to release fear and release judgment, we participate and we create a miracle. So it seems to me, on that night in 1914, when those soldiers started singing, when they just opened their heart to the possibility that this night could be different, they made that shift. And they created a miracle of love and of hope, reaching out their hands and inviting that same shift from the other side and being met with it. So the same opportunity is always present for us. We're not in desperate circumstances, but many of us at this time of year feel loneliness and desperation and wonder what is the way out of that particular hole we have dug for ourselves. We have the same opportunity. We just need to give ourselves permission to look for that miracle, to be that miracle for ourselves and for others. When we can make that shift in perception from fear to love, when we realize that we contain a light which has never gone out, no matter what we do to cover it up, and that is the same light that is carried in you and you and you and all of us, same light, we experience and we share a more hopeful and peaceful and loving world. Now this is a truth we know early on. I mean, we know this when we are born. I mean, we can look in the face of a baby and we can see it. Now at our advanced ages, we've kind of forgotten that and we're jaded and we're experienced. But that same hopeful baby, that same pure, wonderful, perfect soul is inside each of you. Untouched, unchanged, and is just waiting to get out. Waiting for us to wipe away the years of roadblocks and stuff and barriers and experience and judgment of knowledge that we have just layered over it like a bag of rocks we just carry around and we refuse to set down. That's exactly how it is. We just pick it up every day and carry it around and we don't even think about it anymore. And we never realize we have the opportunity to just put it down and start new. If we are lucky, we sometimes run across those who show us our true nature, who act as what Wayne Mueller calls strong companions and clear mirrors, to show us, back to us, the truth of who we are. Now, I sometimes share stories with you about my kids because I am so lucky to have two disabled adult kids who haven't taken the time, who haven't maybe had the opportunity to layer on all the stuff that I have, that we have, and just who always live from a place of pure, unadulterated joy. So do their friends. And I want to tell you a story about one of them. This was the cutest thing. This happened to me last week. So I am dropping my daughter off at MARTA Mobility to ride paratransit into her day program. Okay. It's 7:45 in the morning. I've had one cup of coffee. I am not feeling joyful. I am feeling tired. I'm feeling like, oh my God, I got so much to do this day. Okay, so I park the car. The door of the bus opens, and out bounds this young man that we have known since he was about 6. His name is Mark. And he just comes bounding off the bus. He sees me. This huge smile comes on his face. He comes roaring up to me. He picks me up. He swings me around 4 times, and he gives me a huge kiss. And it's like, oh my God. So I look over at the MARTA bus driver, who says, you don't see that very often. And I said, no, you don't. And I think what she meant was, you don't see often somebody picking somebody else up and swinging them around 4 times and giving them a big kiss, which is probably true. But what you also don't see that much was just that wonderful openness and joy and exuberance and the certain knowledge that the world was going to welcome him just as he was. That he didn't have to dress right. He didn't have to have a shave. He didn't have to comb his hair. He just was, and the world was going to love it. And he put that energy out there, and it did. Sometimes I think, why can't we all be like that? Well, the truth of the matter is we can. We just need to work at it a little more. We just need to keep unpacking the stuff that is over us. We need to consciously make that transition, that shift from fear to love. And we do it. We can do it in any circumstance. I mean, I was thinking about this yesterday. I had so much to do. I had to write a talk. I had to grade papers. I had to get ready to do 9,000 different things that I won't bore you with. And I was feeling tight. I was feeling fearful. I was feeling like I'm not going to get it done. And I thought, wait a minute. What the heck am I talking about? So I thought about it, and I just made that shift. I just released it. I said, God is going to handle it. I said, I'm going to look at this through eyes of love. I'm just going to take that fear and just show it the door. And I cannot tell you how much better I felt. It just is an act of will. And we all can do it. We just need to remember. The lesson we learn in this season is that we all have the power to bring that light of miraculous joy into our lives and into the lives of each other. And we do it by bringing it into ours. Just by shining that light. But unless we have it, we can't shine it. Unless we turn it on and uncover it, it's not shining. That's the power we have. We release judgment, fear, and assumptions, and we remember that our own perceptions of peace can result in a world of peace. Okay, so then I was on a peace thing. I was on a joy thing. And so I started looking at all our holiday stories. Okay, those of you who know me know that I am an absolute gadget goober. Okay, so last year somebody gave me an Amazon Echo. And its name is Alexa. And what it does right now at the holiday season is if you ask it nicely, if you ask it right, it will get Tim Curry to read for you A Christmas Carol. Okay, now all of you are going to go out and buy an Alexa, but it does. Tim Curry, Alexa, please read me A Christmas Carol. Alexa, now reading. Okay, so it does. And so it reminded me of the story of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And there is this great scene where I was reminded of this principle that all it takes is just a shift in perception. Do you remember that scene where Jacob Marley first visits him? And he's terrified, and he's trying to say this experience is not happening. And finally, Marley is so upset, and Scrooge looks at him and says, "But Jacob, you were always a good man of business." Remember that? And Marley shakes his chains and he wails and he says, "Business, business, mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business." And what that whole story was about was how Scrooge came to shift his perception from being a nasty old curmudgeon to being an open heart of love and giving and joy, which changed his life and the life of many around him. That's what all these holiday stories do. Look at Miracle on 34th Street, same thing. It's a Wonderful Life. So that's totally what that's about. We have George Bailey, right, who thinks his life is small and meaningless. He's given up his dreams. He feels trapped. Here's his brother who has all the adulation. So George decides to go jump off a bridge. And then this very unlikely angel comes along and says, "No, all you need to do is look at and appreciate what you have. And realize the connection and the love and the joy that you have and that you bring to so many others." That's all we have to do, is we just have to open our hearts to see what we have and what we can give each other, and also what we can receive from each other. What a blessing that we are given this Christmas season, this holiday season, to ask ourselves these questions. How do we take a better and a deeper look at our lives? How do we unpack what is on top of the light that we all have and shine it out? What foxholes have I dug for myself, and how do I get out of them? What judgments do I release to let the pure joy that I am just shine out? This season reminds us that it is our birthright to be miracle makers ourselves, just by being the light and the love that we are. So let's step out and just shine our lights and be those miracles in this wonderful season. So let's take these thoughts.